that love was engendered through my proximity to the New York City watershed. See, I lived adjacent to about 1,200 acres of watershed, and that was my backyard. And that's where I really developed the love of fishing and hiking and exploring in that watershed.
So that had an impact on you growing up, obviously.
It did. By virtue of the fact that, you know, I was able to spend time there with my brothers and my sisters and go on little half day and day hikes in there. And again, fishing, catching frogs, turtles, so on. Looking at the dragonflies, the butterflies, all the different animals in that area. It was really an oasis in a sense, because, you know, you're near major highways and all that, but it was also quite a place to explore and quite a place to learn. And that really engendered, again, my love of the wild, but in particular local wildlife and local habitats and systems.
You went on to Cornell.
Yes. Yeah, I studied animal science, and ultimately, I don't know, I'm sure I speak for some of the folks on tonight that when you're 19, you think you know what you want to do for the rest of your life, but you may not be so sure. And so at one point I was determined to be a stockbroker, and I'm glad I determined that wasn't a course and a path for me. But I got bitten by the bug when it came to my bio classes, my animal science classes, and I graduated with a degree from the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences in applied economics and business management. So there was that duality of the natural world and the business world, of working with humans. And I think, you know, anybody who goes into conservation in any form, they've got to have that not only ability but desire to work with their fellow humans. That's a really important thing. I mention that to the interns at the zoo all the time. You may love the animals, but you have to work with people, and that's important.
Well, before we go onto the next chapter of your career, was there a particular inflection point, either as a child and or in college, that really made you convinced that that's the path you wanted to take?
Yes. Yeah, there actually was a particular point, and it was right in between. It was the spring of my junior year in high school, I guess it was. I was 16, and a friend of mine had turned me on to an organization known as Earthwatch. And Earthwatch, as many of you may know, is a citizen science-based nonprofit, and they connect scientists in marine biology, archaeology, anthropology, whatever the discipline may be, with lay people. And as a high school student, I was able to, you know, the deal I struck with my folks was, if you give me permission to go, I'll do anything. And they said, well, that's really easy. You just have to raise every penny for it and you can go. So I did that, obviously, you know, and shoveled the driveway and worked for our neighbors and, you know, saved up for the course of about a year. And it was laughable. Now, it was $765, all inclusive. That was it. So it wasn't that much, but to a kid my age, that was a lot. And that was an inflection point for me, because that enabled me to get out into the field, to tag leatherback sea turtles, patrol Davis Beach and St. Croix, and work with marine biologists with that species, and really help leatherbacks to get on better footing in the Caribbean through that one project, or at least have exposure to it. We were only 1 week within a multi-year project, but it gave me a great lens through which to view conservation, and it was an aspiration point for me.
What did you do after graduation?
Yeah, so one of the other things that, you know, I was really passionate about, and I still am passionate about, is writing. And I was working for a publisher at the time, and I really wanted to get into wildlife conservation, probably more so. There was that sort of struggle, you know, one or the other, and I was able to eventually, through a combination of the volunteer work that I had accumulated and the fledgling resume that I built at that time, I was able to land a job at Bergen County Zoo, which is an accredited zoo in New Jersey, in Paramus, New Jersey. And that experience then led to me coming to Beardsley. At the time, believe it or not, I was living in Connecticut and commuting to New Jersey. So I was really happy not to make that commute anymore, but that was just a byproduct. The real love was when I went to Beardsley, the people were wonderful. The animals were wonderful. it was a very good setting, and I was very fortunate to land that job.
And you've been there how many years now?
Been there, let's see, I worked for a little period of time, and then I came back to the zoo when the zoo went to society ownership, to private nonprofit ownership, with support from the city of Bridgeport. And I came back in, this is my 21st year now.
Mm-hmm.
So
great.
it goes really quickly. People say that, how fast can 21 years go? Well, when no 2 days are alike and you love what you do and you have a dynamic workplace, it can be stressful, sure, but time does go very quickly. And I think my colleagues at the zoo would agree with that very quickly.
Yeah, time does go very quickly, but that's interesting because it is a dynamic workplace. So that probably makes it go even faster in some regards.
It does, very fast.
Interesting point. So tell us about Trout in the Classroom.
Sure. Trout in the Classroom is a program that's near and dear to my heart, and I know to other folks at the zoo as well, and to folks in the zoo community. A little over 8 years ago, we had the opportunity to engage with students in Bridgeport in a way in which was very far-reaching through establishing a regional, or rather a local chapter of Trout in the Classroom. Trout in the Classroom is a national education and conservation program. It's set in schools mostly, although there are a few non-school points, the zoo being one of them, of course, that are home to these chapters, but these can range from kindergarten classes to high school classes. And I believe there are also some college level classes, college affiliations with these various chapters around the country. To give you an example of how broad this program is, there are roughly 100 chapters in the state of Connecticut. And what these chapters do is they raise brown trout, typically, sometimes rainbow trout, very rarely brook trout, as in our case, and they raise them to a size where they head start them. So they give them a chance to grow in human care under the guidance of students, very, very significantly, student-led husbandry and water chemistry and all. Well, we'll talk about all the different aspects to it in a little bit, but it enables the students to provide this stewardship input. The kids take real ownership of the project, and they take care of these fish and they grow them, and then we can get them in the river at a certain point where their head started. So that what that means for folks who may not be familiar, it's pretty intuitive, but we grow them to a point where they're less likely to be picked off by those kingfishers and giant water bugs and all their sort of mid-level and lower level predators out there. So at about 4 to 5 inches in length, you can get fish in the river, and they can already bypass run the gauntlet on most of those predators.
Hmm. So the students are raising them from eggs to fingerlings, are they called?
Well, depending upon the chapter, some chapters raise the fish from eggs, where they raise them from fry or fingerling stage. We typically raise them from fry stage, which means they're roughly about 1 inch to 1.5 inches at most. They're very, very light. They weigh just a few grams each. And we raise them to about, well, they still have their par markings on them, but to around the 4 or 5 inch range. So a little larger than your typical fingerling, just beyond fingerling size.
And where do you get them?
We work in conjunction with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, the Fisheries Division, the Inland Fisheries Division. And they have been staunch partners of ours on many other projects, but on this project in particular for more than 8 years. Since its inception, we've been working with them. And without them, none of this would be possible. And there are other folks that are key stakeholders and key conservation partners in this Trout in the Classroom chapter.
And how many would you get from Connecticut Deep?
Well, it depends upon the year, and it depends upon their allocation, but typically we will get anywhere between 40 and about 150 fish, because we may get relatively larger or smaller fish in any given year. But this past year, we raised our largest school of fish to date. We had about 150 fish that we were raising this year. So that's quite a lot.
Thanks for watching. For more information, visit our website, at www.futurefrogmen.org.